Let's keep the conversation going with Christopher Sands. He is the director of the Canada Institute with the Woodrow Wilson Center in Washington. Christopher, thank you so much for making time for us today.
I'm glad to be here.
Can we please begin, sir, with the latest posting on Truth Social by Donald Trump, where, sir, he is really taking some jabs at Canadians. He's talking about subsidies to Canada. He's describing a nation state as a state of the United States. I mean, it's continuous. It's, I guess, funny. But what exactly is he trying to achieve with his biggest trading partner?
Well, I think it's an interesting preparation for negotiations that he sort of stumbled on when his first purpose was to tease Justin Trudeau. After their Mar-a-Lago and even during their Mar-a-Lago meal, I think what Donald Trump figured out was that Justin Trudeau takes himself very seriously. So he started tweaking him and calling him the governor of the 51st state. And he's just kind of carried on this ever since, realizing that with the resignation of Chrystia Freeland, there's a split in the Canadian government. And it's not just in Canada. A lot of our allies have the same split between people who want to respond to Trump by finding an accommodation, avoiding, a clash or a 25% tariff. Justin Trudeau is in that camp. That's why he went to Mar-a-Lago. And people who think the right response is to punch back, to stand your ground, to insist that you be respected, which is where Chrystia Freeland was, part of the reason that she left. It's also where Claudia Sheinbaum, the Mexican president, is, and some other leaders are. And you can look at that debate. Trump is splitting up our allies along those lines. And he's not even president yet. But it's interesting to see, as this goes back and forth, which option most countries end up picking, because Trump knows he's having this effect. He's enjoying it a little bit. I don't think it's aimed at Canadians. It's aimed at the government, but it's become part of his throwing everyone off balance before USMCA renegotiation or CUSMA renegotiation in Canada, and so many other negotiations that he's planning for day one and on in his second term.
So much I want to pull apart there. So let's begin with the exit of Chrystia Freeland from a senior position in the Liberal cabinet. So she will not be there at the negotiating tables as the new NAFTA negotiations continue, with the tariff conversations, with any sort of conversations that would include Donald Trump. Is that a big loss for Canada from your point of view?
I think it's a big loss for a lot of companies. And put it this way, Donald Trump has chosen not to put Robert Lighthizer, who was his U.S. trade representative who negotiated the new NAFTA, into a job in the new administration. If he had gone into USTR or another serious role, we would have been confident that we knew what the strategy was going to be. Robert Lighthizer written a book. We know a lot about how he thinks and how he operates. He's been very consistent over the years. Taking him out of the equation, yes, the president has chosen Jameson Greer as his nominee for U.S. Trade Representative, someone who is a protege of Lighthizer's. But at least until we see how he behaves, we don't know if he's going to be Lighthizer-like or not. On the Canadian side, we had Steve Verhoeven, your chief negotiator, but we had Chrystia Freeland always guiding those negotiations, working on the big strategy and keeping her cabinet colleagues informed. If she were still in that role, then the business community and Americans would understand sort of where Canada was coming from. We know her style. She's also been very consistent over the years. Taking her and Lighthizer out of the equation means that the next negotiation becomes less predictable. And that, I think, is going to be a problem for markets. We all want to know how trade is going to be treated. What are the tariff rates? Millions of business decisions are made on the basis of some predictability in the near term. And we've just thrown some of our little bit of predictability about the new NAFTA negotiations in 2026 as part of the review out the window. And I think it's going to make it harder for a lot of us to game that and to think about scenarios and to try to figure out how we can best position our companies and our communities.
I want to return to how you were addressing that there are at least two different ways of moving forward from Canada, from Mexico, and other nation states, how they negotiate with Trump. And you've acknowledged that our prime minister is taking a more conciliatory, more friendly, a softer approach. And Dominic LeBlanc, who's now been promoted to finance minister and now will have a key role to play in those negotiations. In fact, he was at Mar-a-Lago for that dinner a couple of weeks back. So if they're taking the softer approach, how effective do you think that's going to be for the Canadian cause?
Right. I actually think there's some logic in that softer approach, not because it's generous to Trump, but because it doesn't let Trump's sort of psychological warfare throw you off balance. When he issued his "I'm going to tear up NAFTA" threat back in 2017, when he first became president, we all talked about what would our trade be like without NAFTA. And it was a shock. And we spent a lot of time trying to run through scenarios, figure how would our economy survive. But underneath that threat, Donald Trump said, unless Canada and Mexico agree to come to the table and negotiate changes. When Canada and Mexico came to the table, the threat got pushed to the side. Trump got what he wanted. I think what Justin Trudeau has realized is, yes, Trump threatened a 25% tariff, but his message was, I want more work from Canada to stop fentanyl from coming into the United States, to deal with migration, and to improve border security. None of those things is off the agenda. Canada supports all of those things: less fentanyl, less irregular migration, and good border security. That's a given. So why fight Trump? It's like a guy who goes into McDonald's, orders a hamburger, and then threatens to smash the McDonald's if he doesn't get a hamburger. If he pays for his hamburger, he's going to get his hamburger. It's silly to spend all this time with his sort of psychological warfare and bluster. I think that it's not so much being conciliatory in this sense, it's being pragmatic and not getting distracted, which I think has worked for Justin Trudeau in the past, and that's why he's going back to it now. And it may be the smarter strategy.
But all things considered, and I'm sure you've been following what's going on in Ottawa with the amount of pressure right now on our Prime Minister to step to the side. Can he effectively continue to negotiate on behalf of Canadians with this Trump incoming administration when his own political positioning in Canada is so precarious?
I'd say two things about that. One is we are doing a lot of before Trump's in office sort of reaction. Mm-hmm. Should we be reacting now? I mean, Canada's not alone. The world is reacting to Donald Trump as if he's president today. We kind of have to wait a little bit to know what we're actually dealing with. And there might be something lost if you prematurely offer concessions or you decide your strategy before you know how his second administration is going to function. But the second thing about Justin Trudeau's position, ultimately his role is for Canadians to decide. So I won't weigh in on that. Canadians have to decide who best represents them in anything like this. But I will make 2 points. Donald Trump knows that the Liberal government is a minority government. It's not as strong as it was. He reads the polls, even his own polls, and he knows that Canada's leadership, the current Prime Minister, has lower standing. The Conservatives are polling higher, and that's been consistent for a while. I think he sees those two things as, final thing, that Canada has to have an election no later than October 20th, 2025. Those three things mean the Canadian government is not in its strongest position negotiating against the U.S. And so I think Trump smells weakness. He's pushing on that. He's trying to create a little bit of off balance on the side of Ottawa. That's something Canadians should consider when they're thinking about the next election. But ultimately, they may decide that having someone like Trudeau, who's worked with Trump before, is the best course, or they may decide to make a change. It could go either way. I don't think there's a magic answer. There's no golden ticket to handling Trump. There's no best choice. Whoever takes over is going to have to be able to rely on a great public service, some excellent expertise, not only within the government of Canada, but in think tanks, and something we all often forget. Many of the things that Donald Trump wants from Canada are in the remit of provinces, not the federal government. Certainly if we're talking about border security, critical minerals, energy, those are provincial things. And we've seen some provinces stepping up as well. So it's a big package. There are a lot of people who will stand up for Canada in that mix. And we'll just have to see what the next election brings in terms of voters' final answer on who should represent them at the federal level.
Christopher Sands, very good to speak with you, sir. Thank you for your time.
It's a pleasure.